Picture this. You're out on the water, engine humming, until it isn't. Some outboards didn't just fail. They fought back. Explosions, runaway throttles, melting pistons, you name it. These weren't engines. They were floating time bombs. Welcome to the 25 most dangerous outboards ever built. The OMC Ficht was supposed to be the savior of two strokes, and instead, it nearly killed the company. In the late 1990s, OMC promised the Ficht would run cleaner, quieter, and sip less fuel than anything else. But the reality? It coughed, sputtered, and occasionally blew itself apart. The direct injection tech was brilliant on paper, but fragile in the real world. Dealers joked it had two modes, perfect and panic. Injectors clogged, pistons melted, and warranty departments went into overtime. A few late-model versions ran beautifully, but by then, OMC was bankrupt, and trust was gone. Ask any mechanic today, and they'll sigh before saying, it ran great until it didn't. The Ficht wasn't evil, just rushed, misunderstood, and unlucky. The Chrysler Charger 105 looked like the outboard version of a muscle car, and acted like one too. Loud, fast, and temperamental. It had a bold metallic blue cowling that screamed confidence, but under it was a two-stroke engine that screamed for mercy. The gear cases were fragile. The ignition timing was moody, and fuel efficiency was something Chrysler engineers apparently forgot to include. Owners loved the thrill, but hated the repairs. One joked, "It burns more gas than my pickup and still can't outrun it." Chrysler Marine didn't last long after that, and the Charger faded into legend, a symbol of raw American ambition that looked great until it started coughing up smoke. The Mercury Black Max XR2 was a hooligan. Pure and simple. It sounded like a fighter jet on idle and pulled like a runaway freight train. But for all that muscle, it had a habit of self-destructing if you so much as looked at it funny. Lightweight and high-strung, it demanded precision tuning. Too rich, it fouled plugs. Too lean, it detonated. Racers loved it. Weekend boaters feared it. The Black Max earned its name, both for its black cowl and the black cloud it left behind when it finally quit. It's remembered fondly today by those who tamed it, and cursed by those who didn't. Before we jump into number 4, let's take a breather, because trust me, the next few outboards get a lot scarier. If you're enjoying this deep dive into boating's most dangerous creations, hit subscribe and drop a comment with the worst engine you've ever owned. All right, ready? Let's keep going. Force outboards were the bargain bins of boating, and the 125 was their crown jewel of chaos. Built from Chrysler leftovers after Mercury bought the brand, it combined outdated design with questionable materials. It vibrated so much you could lose fillings, and its carburetors clogged at the sight of ethanol. One mechanic said, "It doesn't run bad. It just never runs the same way twice." Force engines were cheap, but that's about all they were. By the late 90s, Mercury quietly retired the name. The Force 125 remains infamous as the outboard that made budget boating feel like a contact sport. The Evinrude Intruder 150 was a beast with an identity crisis. It packed serious punch, but it was built during OMC's turbulent years, when quality control was more of a suggestion. Some ran beautifully, others barely made it out of the marina. The oiling system was unreliable, the cooling inconsistent, and the power brutal. One owner described it best. "When it's running right, it's a dream. When it's not, it's a nightmare with a propeller." Still, few engines looked or sounded as fierce. The Intruder might have scared its owners, but it also gave them stories they'll never forget. Yamaha's early P150 was tough on paper and terrifying in practice. It was one of Yamaha's first attempts at a big saltwater two-stroke, but corrosion treated it like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Within a few years, exhaust housings looked like Swiss cheese. Mechanics joked you didn't service it, you just reshelled it like a hermit crab. Power delivery was brutal, though. It could yank a heavy boat onto plane like a bodybuilder pulling a jet ski. But longevity? Not its strong suit. Even die-hard Yamaha fans admit the early P100s and 50s aged faster than a sunburnt tourist. Still, when it ran, it was glorious chaos, fast, loud, and full of character. Suzuki built the DT200 to be their statement piece, light, powerful, and aggressively tuned. Unfortunately, it also became a statement about how not to mix early electronic fuel systems with salt water. The engine ran beautifully until it didn't. Ignition modules failed, sensors corroded, and the motor could suddenly act like it had selective hearing. Some owners said it ran like a dream, and others said it dreamed about running. Despite its issues, the DT200 was a gutsy performer and sounded like a swarm of angry bees on espresso. Today, it's a collectible curiosity, remembered fondly by few and feared by many. The Force 85 is what happens when accountants design an engine. It was built cheaply, sold cheaply, and often failed spectacularly. Parts were a patchwork of old Chrysler leftovers, with ignition systems that seemed to play roulette with each start. Boaters loved the price, but hated the maintenance. One owner quipped, "It's like dating someone exciting. You never know if they'll start or explode." Vibration was so intense it could rattle cup holders loose. Mercury tried reviving the Force line, but quickly realized some ghosts shouldn't be disturbed. Today, Force 85s survive mostly as horror stories at marina bars. The Evinrude 225 Ficht was meant to prove OMC's direct injection dreams could work on a big scale. Instead, it turned into a cautionary tale of overconfidence. When tuned right, it was smooth and efficient. When tuned wrong, which was often, it detonated cylinders with alarming enthusiasm. Some engines even caught fire. Dealers called it the grenade with spark plugs. BRP later fixed the flaws, but the damage was done. The 225 Ficht's failures were so public, they helped bury OMC entirely. Few engines have ever combined brilliance and disaster quite so dramatically. Before we hit the double digits, take a second, because the next engines make the earlier ones look tame. If you're still with us, you're clearly one of the brave ones. So hit subscribe, tap that like button, and tell us in the comments which outboard nearly killed your weekend. Now, let's get back to the madness. Johnson's VRO, Variable Ratio Oiling 70, was an early attempt to eliminate premixing. The concept was noble, automatic oil metering based on throttle position. The execution? Less so. Faulty oil pumps caused engines to run dry, leading to catastrophic failures. Many owners ditched the system entirely, converting back to manual mixing just to sleep better. Still, the Johnson 70 VRO holds a strange charm, an era when boating innovation meant risking a piston or two. It's a reminder that sometimes simpler really is better. The Tohatsu 140 was Japan's answer to Mercury's high-performance craze, and it was a wild one. Lightweight, punchy, and brutally simple, it could push a small hull to scary speeds. But that simplicity came at a price. Cooling issues, sticky reed valves, and unpredictable idle made it feel like racing with a hand grenade for a throttle. Fishermen loved it for its torque. Mechanics loved it for job security. One owner claimed his Tohatsu started every time, right after he replaced everything but the logo. Still, the 140 proved Tohatsu's engineering grit. It didn't pretend to be civilized. It was a raw, over-caffeinated powerhouse that made every trip feel like a drag race. Honda's first-generation BF-75 tried to bring the quiet reliability of their cars to the water. Instead, it brought headaches. It was underpowered for its size, heavy as a small fridge, and suffered from vapor lock that turned hot restarts into gym workouts. It was refined, yes, but so refined that salt water ate it alive. Mechanics joked it ran smooth until it didn't run at all. Honda fixed these issues later, but early owners got the short end of the prop. Still, it's remembered with a mix of annoyance and affection. It showed that even Honda had to learn that the sea doesn't forgive the same way roads do. Yamaha's first 225 EFI engines were pioneers and prototypes all at once. The idea was great. Combine two-stroke punch with electronic precision. The reality? Constant sensor failures and fuel mapping that made idle sound like a hiccuping chainsaw. Owners loved the top-end speed but dreaded docking, where it might stall like a nervous teenager parallel parking. One old-timer said, "It'll run great all day unless you actually need it to." It's rare to find one still running without a full wiring rebuild. But credit where it's due. These engines paved the way for Yamaha's modern legends. Just not quietly. Before Nissan joined forces with Tohatsu, they tried to make their own outboards, and the NS90A was their ambitious misfire. It looked modern and ran strong when new, but early corrosion resistance was so bad that saltwater boaters described them as biodegradable propulsion. Gear case seals failed, ignition modules fried, and spare parts vanished faster than a tuna at feeding time. Still, it had a cult following in freshwater circles, where its lively acceleration actually shined. The NS90A's legacy? Proof that even Japanese precision wasn't immune to marine mayhem. It was the right idea, just in the wrong environment. Yes, even Suzuki's Golden Child had a rocky start. The original DF-140 was one of the first lightweight four-strokes to hit mainstream, but its early gear cases cracked under stress, and oil blow-by was so common that owners started carrying spare quarts like snacks. Despite that, it was a revelation. Clean, efficient, and futuristic when it worked. Suzuki quietly refined it in later years, making the DF-140A one of the most beloved outboards today. Those early models, though, they taught Suzuki that innovation isn't about perfection, it's about surviving your first mistakes. Chrysler's 125 horsepower outboard was an ambitious powerhouse that often forgot how to behave. On its best days, it roared like a lion. On its worst, it coughed, stalled, and occasionally refused to shift gears altogether. It was the kind of motor that made you pack a paddle just in case. Its carburetors were notoriously touchy, and electrical gremlins seemed built in from the factory. The ignition system could fry itself faster than breakfast toast, and the lower unit was allergic to high RPMs. Yet, it looked fantastic in white and chrome, a symbol of late 70s optimism. Chrysler's 125 wasn't evil, it was just ahead of its materials science. They meant well, the metal didn't. The Evinrude Intruder 150 was supposed to bring the fun back to big two-strokes. Instead, it brought anxiety. The power delivery was aggressive enough to make hulls chine walk, while its fuel burn could empty a tank faster than a bachelor party. It wasn't unreliable, just unforgiving. Skip winterization, and it'd punish you. Use the wrong oil, and it'd sulk until something broke. Owners loved the noise, hated the repairs. Mechanics described it as a gym membership for your wallet. Still, when tuned right, it screamed with glorious defiance. Dangerous? Only if you weren't ready for its attitude. The Force 120 was Bayliner's attempt to democratize boating and nearly scared off half the market. Lightweight and cheap, it powered countless starter boats, but its build quality could be charitably described as hopeful. Vibration was constant, wiring brittle, and carb tuning a nightmare. Mechanics called them self-learning engines because you'd learn something new every time it broke. To its credit, it helped thousands get on the water affordably. Unfortunately, it also taught them new curse words. Today, the Force 120 survives mostly as a warning label in outboard history. Mercury's Optimax line was marketed as clean, efficient, and futuristic until the early 175s started grenading. Injector issues, air compressors that seized mid-run, and sensors that quit like overworked interns turned it into a PR disaster. Owners joke that Optimax was short for optional maximum power. When it worked, it was glorious. When it didn't, it was a long tow home. Mercury fixed later versions, but the early 175s were ticking time bombs, proof that innovation without reliability is just expensive chaos. Yamaha's 250 HP DI, high-pressure direct injection, was supposed to combine two-stroke punch with four-stroke refinement. Instead, it combined anxiety with repair bills. Early HPDI injectors clogged easily, leading to lean conditions that melted pistons like butter in July. Owners called it the heartbreak motor because when it ran, it was perfection, and when it didn't, it was financial ruin. Some even carried spare injectors on board like first aid kits. Yamaha eventually perfected the tech, but the early HPDI taught every boater one lesson: never trust anything with high pressure in its name. Honda's early BF225 four-stroke promised bulletproof reliability, then promptly overheated itself into infamy. The culprit? Cracked exhaust housings that let salt water sneak where it shouldn't. Engines corroded from the inside out, sometimes within 200 hours. Owners were shocked. A Honda that rusted faster than a bicycle left on the pier. Still, when running, the BF225 was smooth and quiet, like a sewing machine on steroids. But once that corrosion hit, repairs cost more than a used car. Mechanics started calling them rust-powered propulsion. Honda quietly fixed the issue years later, but the early BF225 remains a cautionary tale that even perfectionists can trip over salt water. The Suzuki DT150 had all the makings of a great outboard: lightweight, peppy, and Japanese precision engineering. But early ignition and oiling gremlins turned it into a ticking time bomb. If you didn't use Suzuki's exact oil mix, it would seize faster than a teenager's first clutch. Owners who babied it swore by it. Those who didn't swore at it. The CDI units failed randomly, and rebuilds were expensive. Despite the drama, the DT150 pushed Suzuki toward reliability greatness. It taught them pain builds progress, especially when your progress costs $3,000 in parts. The OMCC drive was a brilliant idea ruined by reality. It combined inboard power with outboard versatility, bolted to the transom like an engineering experiment gone rogue. In theory, it freed up deck space and improved balance. In practice, it leaked, corroded, and often trapped mechanics in nightmarish repairs. Owners loved how unique it looked, right until it stranded them offshore. It was OMC's moonshot that never left orbit. And while few survive today, they're beloved by collectors who enjoy a good puzzle and a lot of patience. Mariner's 175 EFI was Mercury's twin in disguise, except this twin had mood swings. It either ran beautifully or decided fuel pressure was optional. The early EFI electronics were as stable as a cat on a jet ski. When it worked, performance was breathtaking, crisp throttle, instant response. When it didn't, you'd better have oars. Dealers called them 50-50 engines. 50% chance to run, 50% chance to ruin your weekend. Still, the Mariner 175 was part of boating history, proof that early EFI tech needed more testing and fewer owners with short tempers. The 1985 Yamaha 90 was the little engine that could until it couldn't. A simple carb issue often turned into full-on detonation, and the head gaskets failed faster than promises at a boat show. Yet, when dialed in, it was a feisty performer. Small fishing boats loved it for its punchy mid-range, even if it drank like a sailor. Many mechanics remember it fondly, mainly because fixing them paid for their houses. It wasn't Yamaha's finest hour, but it proved something. Even great brands need their oops chapters to write the legend that follows. Every boater has a story about that one engine, the one that nearly sank their weekend, their wallet, or their sanity. These 25 outboards weren't just unreliable, they were genuinely dangerous. Exploding fuel lines, overheating blocks, throttle cables that refused to obey, they turned calm lakes into chaos. Some blew up, others caught fire. A few just left their owners stranded, watching the horizon instead of the fish finder. But every single one taught us something about what not to build. If you enjoyed this breakdown of boating's biggest disasters, hit subscribe, like, and tell us your worst engine nightmare in the comments.